Well, I'd like to introduce now the moderator of our keynote conversation today. Javier Palomarez is the president and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council, where he has emerged as one of the country's leading advocates for small business and the Hispanic community. A nationally recognized voice on entrepreneurship, multicultural markets, and the Hispanic electorate, he brings more than 2 decades of leadership experience across major corporations like Allstate, Sprint, and Bank of America. The son of Mexican immigrants, Mr. Palomarez was raised in South Texas as a migrant farm worker. He has earned a variety of awards over his career, including Top 100 Hispanics in America, the Governor of Mexico's Otli Award, the highest honor for a non-Mexican citizen, and Spain Fundación Inspirando Libres, pardon, I know we have a lot of Spanish speakers in this room and I'm not one of them, most influential Hispanic in America. So please welcome to the stage, Javier Palomarez.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to Trammell and Peter and the entire EarthX team for bringing together so many leaders, so many conferences committed to the future of our environment, our economy, and our communities. As Peter said, my name's Javier, and I'm the president. I have the privilege of being the president and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council. You can clap for that. We are the leading advocate for our nation's 4.5 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $850 billion to our American economy every single year. And while we are immensely proud to advocate on behalf of men and women who happen to be of Hispanic descent, we never forget that we are first and foremost American business. And every tax bill we pay, every product we manufacture, every job we create, and every service we provide goes to benefit our American economy. In fact, at the USHBC, the only thing we're prouder of than being Hispanic is being American. In our work, we constantly interact with small business owners across this country. And I can tell you that the issues being discussed here at EarthX are not theoretical to them. Rising energy costs, water scarcity, supply chain challenges, and a regulatory uncertainty like we've never seen before. These are all very real for our businesses. And the need for smart, practical, courageous leadership has never been greater. And that's where Trammell comes in, and Peter as well. That's why also the conversation we're about to get into is so very critical and so timely. For too long, many of our national debates have been framed as a series of false choices: commerce or conservation, innovation or preservation, prosperity or protection. But the truth is, America will not succeed if we don't learn how to do all of these things, do them all well, and do them all at the same time. We need a healthy environment and a competitive economy. We need an energy strategy that is reliable, affordable, and realistic. And we need serious understanding of how issues like policy, trade, and our relationship with other nations are so critical. We must be working together. Few people understand this better than the gentleman I'm about to introduce, Secretary Ken Salazar. Ken Salazar has a long and storied history of service to our nation in the areas of law enforcement, politics, environmental stewardship, and international diplomacy. He first served as Attorney General for the state of Colorado He was later elected as United States Senator for Colorado. Then he was appointed to be Secretary of the Interior by President Barack Obama. And most recently, President Joe Biden appointed him to be Ambassador to Mexico. You can clap for that too. Now, before serving as U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, he served in a variety of consulting and advisory roles, advising the most prolific and important people on the globe on the topics that we're about to talk about. Secretary Salazar has spent a lifetime working on the issues that are front and center in our national dialogue. Issues like energy, conservation, land, water, diplomacy, migration, immigration, and international relationships. He understands that the future of North America will be shaped not only by governments, but will be shaped whether we can build stronger partnerships between policymakers, communities, and commerce. So, ladies and gentlemen, for a conversation on the future of environmental stewardship, the role of international relations, and the direction of our nation, please welcome the one and only Secretary Ken Salazar. Right here, right over here, sir.
Right here?
You go to the left, I'll go to the right.
Left, right. Thank you, sir. The back.
Well, Secretary Salazar, thank you for making time for this. I know you had to travel to be with us, and it took a lot of wrangling with your schedulers to get you here. So we're delighted that you could join us. I want to start, sir, at the beginning, and the conversation will generally be in three categories: the Secretary's personal life, his upbringing, kind of what led him to where he is. Then we'll talk about environmental stewardship. And I think because we can't pass up the opportunity, I want to also talk about our relationship with Mexico and the rest of Latin America, if that's okay with you, sir. So let's start at the beginning. Now, if I understand correctly, your family has been ranching in Colorado for over 5 generations. In fact, you've been ranching in Colorado since before Colorado was a state. Now, I imagine your upbringing gave you a lifetime and a very different perspective on how closely land, water, conservation, and commercial success have to work together. So my question to you is, how did that upbringing shape the way that you think about leadership and environmental stewardship, sir?
Well, thank you very much, Javier. Let me first say to you and to everybody who's here that EarthX and what Trammell Crow and the team are doing here is absolutely the right thing, because we're on target to do everything we can to try to protect the only planet that belongs to us. It's our home and it's our Earth. So how about Happy Earth Day? What do you think? Happy Earth Day? Huh? You know, we would do these events in Mexico. We did them at the Washington on the National Mall for Earth Day over the years. And if you think about where we are in the environmental movement, this is one of the existential issues of our time. So it's just an honor for me to be here with you, Javier. Your own story is one which always inspires me and should inspire every person in the United States of America that we can do better, that we're on a march towards a more perfect union. So just thank you so much. On your question, you know, my family's been in what is now New Mexico and Colorado. You know, I see my cousin, Don Sandoval, Don Salazar from Youngsville, New Mexico. Our families came in, Santa Fe, Nuevo Mexico, Española, Chama, Youngsville, Abiquiu, way back, 400 some years ago. So by the time we get to the Mexican-American War in 1848, our families had been in the Southwest for 250 years. Okay, that's a long time. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo makes us citizens of the United States. Interesting that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo also had a pathway to citizenship. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo protected our land and our culture and our rights. That was a treaty between the United States and Mexico. So out of that, where was my family? Well, they were living in Chamita, just outside of Española, New Mexico. So what was their choice? The war was over, Mexico lost 55% of its territory, so they were going to move down to the new border. No, they were going to stay where they'd been for 250 years. So my family then, after the Mexican-American War, moves up to the ranch where we live in Los Rincones in the San Luis Valley. The San Luis Valley is the highest alpine valley in the world, surrounded by the most beautiful mountain ranges. You step out of my parents' house, our house, and you look out to the east, and it's the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the blood of Christ. You look to the west, and it's the San Juan Mountains, after St. John the Baptist, the name of my grandfather, by the way. The rivers that run through our ranch are the San Antonio River and the Conejos River, all tributaries of the Rio Grande, the Rio Bravo, as it used to be called, that then comes across the Colorado-New Mexico line all the way to El Paso, and then, as you know, and as my friends here from Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, and McAllen and Brownsville and all these other places, forms the boundary between the United States and Mexico, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So that history informs me a lot in terms of my own story and the chapters that I have lived. But importantly, you go back to what it was like then growing up. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have telephone. We were poor. We were remote. People thought that we were so different. If we called ourselves Mexican, it was seen as a negative, as a pejorative. But if we called ourselves Spanish, that was okay. Okay? So long story short, I've been blessed and informed in the Keystone values that I think all of us share. Doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're like my friends from Mexico or who are here. It's about our family, about our faith, about our community. And those are the values that have kept me going in all the different manifestations of the life that I have been so privileged to live.
Well, I have to say, those values have paid off for the nation. And I know that I can only imagine that when you were stuck in traffic in Mexico City or in D.C., you closed your eyes and thought about that beautiful valley instead of the car in front of you when you're stuck in traffic in places like New York and D.C. and Mexico City.
I still do. And let me just say, I think that none of us should ever forget where we come from. And all of us should continue to discern that history, because everybody's entitled to know who they are and to celebrate themselves with the self-respect that's endowed upon us by our Creator. I mean, that's sort of a very simple formula, but I think it works.
Yeah, good advice, good advice. Now, you've served as Attorney General, United States Senator, Secretary of the Interior, Ambassador to Mexico. You are, in fact, one of the most accomplished public leaders of our time. But what first called you to public service? Like going from a ranch to the places and positions you've been in, what caused you to begin that journey?
It's a great question. It has to do with public service and the importance of serving other people. You know, I could have stayed in law, and I was a lawyer I've been with some of the best lawyers in America, with some of the best law firms in America. But I wanted to give back. I wanted to give back to protect our land and our water. You know, my motto when I ran for Attorney General in 1998 was fighting for Colorado's land, water, and people. My motto when President Obama and I talked about my serving as Secretary of Interior, 8th in line to the President of the United States. My motto then was fighting for America's land, water, and people. My motto in Mexico, as I see President Calderon and other people who are here, they heard it often in Mexico, didn't always agree with me, but it was about that. It's about fighting for America's land, water, and people. So it's the cause of creating a better world for everybody. You know, in your case, I know your story, Javier. This guy, the son of migrant workers, out there chasing a truck to even get water for him in the fields, and yet somehow becomes one of the most prominent business leaders in the United States of America.
This is not about me, sir.
No.
About me.
Let's give it up for Javier.
No.
And let me, because I may, this is a little bit about celebration. And I don't want this crew here to feel like we're not celebrating this great gathering. So will all the people who are Mexicanos, please stand up. A ver, let me see. I see los Mexicanos. Please stand up. A ver. Come on, right here from Dallas, Texas.
Míralos.
Miren, miren nomás. Que viva México.
Viva
que viva
México.
los Estados Unidos. Look at you.
¿A poco no? Mira nomás.
Thank you.
We come in peace, but we do have you surrounded, they said. So moving on to the environment, sir. Mr. Secretary, you've served at the highest levels of law enforcement, of government, of diplomacy, and to a very large extent, environmental stewardship. During your time, you've had to grapple with some of the tough choices that to this day continue to face the nation. And one of those has been how we choose to protect the environment. So my question is, when you look at our nation right now, at this moment, do you believe America is doing enough to show that economic growth and environmental stewardship are not opposing forces, that they can work together and they can work in tandem?
No, we're not doing enough. And that's why the purpose of EarthX here and this gathering by Trammell Crow and all of you who are here on both sides of the border is so important. Because the cause that we care about transcends the political time and the turbulence of this moment and this administration. Because we're on the right path on sustainability, on renewable energy, on harnessing innovation, on taking care of the transboundary environmental issues that face us. So the answer to your question, Javier, is absolutely not. We're not doing enough. But our biggest danger here is the reversal that we see going on.
Yeah.
You had meetings with some wonderful business leaders here last night that you pulled together, Javier. In one company, they create wind turbines. You know, Texas and Iowa are the number 1 and 2 in wind energy. That wasn't true 20 years ago, but they're number 1 and 2. 2 Republican states. Wind turbines are powering a big part of our grid today. Well, this wind turbine company has had to lay off 2,500 employees because of the reversals that are happening now. There were 750 clean energy jobs, or clean energy projects, not jobs, that were moving fast forward. This administration has basically gutted 250 of them. Yeah. So it's a time to be worried, but it's also a time to have hope because we know that we can do it. You know, just on solar energy, I mean, I had the honor as Secretary of Interior to map out the nation, to map out the oceans of America, to see where we could harness the power of the wind, the power of the sun. And we permitted over 12,000 megawatts of power when I was Secretary of Interior. People used to say, yeah, we're never going to get the power from the sun, the power from the wind. And I say, well, you might think we're crazy that we're chasing the sun. But the fact is, you see what's happened in Texas, in New Mexico, in places as far away like Wyoming, up in Iowa, wherever you go, the offshores, off the Atlantic and off the Pacific, we're harnessing these new energies that are going to save our planet.
Absolutely. That deserves a round of applause, and I think the message is very timely. I think we need to have a sense of urgency, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about Trammell. In fact, when you were answering the question right before this one, I remember having this conversation with Trammell at some ungodly hour at his house, and he said, you know, one Earth, one mission, one chance, and he's dedicated a few dollars, as you know, to making this thing come to life. And so, you know, it's really laudable work and amazing for our country. You know, a lot of the debate, though, on environmental stewardship and on policy in general happens at the very highest levels. And you've been at that table many times. You've led the debate. But small business owners and American families feel the impact immediately through energy prices, water access, compliance costs, and things of that nature. So my question to you is, how can our policymakers do a better job of recognizing the real-world impact of the decisions they're making today and how those decisions impact everyday Americans?
They have to understand the reality of where people live. If you think about the industrial areas where there are lots of people in the concept, if you will, of environmental justice, people who are having to live in the midst of a lot of pollution. We've seen a lot of movies that have been done on that. You know, when I think back to the history of the environmental movement and Earth Day and Lake Erie catching on fire because we weren't doing enough to protect our waters and our lakes from pollution. So people are affected in their daily lives, in their health, in their well-being, when we don't do enough to take care of our planet. And so, you know, Trammell Crow, by the way, you look at this, if Trammell's around, make sure you get one of these. It's a little marble that has the earth. He gave it to me in Mexico, okay? We were there, a bunch of people were talking about the environmental issues. How could we bring together a new era of action on the border, on environmental issues, on sustainability, on saving the Selva Maya, all those things that are so important. Trammell says to me, I'm giving you this marble. It's a little globe, has Mexico, Asia, the whole world, the oceans. I even found Don Salazar, I found Youngsville, New Mexico on this little marble, okay? And what Trammell Crow, I won't use his language, but he's pretty clear about it.
They're children of the
He says,
sir.
Here's our planet, don't
Like it
up. So you get the message, he's right.
He is right, he is right. You know, something a bit more kind of to the point, as our nation rushes headlong into the era of artificial intelligence, the need for more data centers has increased exponentially. I think we all know that. But keep in mind that right now, one single large data center uses up to 5 million gallons of water a day. By 2028, in 2 years, data centers in the United States will require up to 32 billion gallons of water every single year. Suffice it to say that data centers are a big driver for increased water demand. So my question is, how can we use intelligent infrastructure and policy making to help balance the need for this new technology, artificial intelligence, and for water conservation at the same time?
So walking around the showroom yesterday when I arrived here, I saw the Texas two-step. Basically, it's Dallas, right? Trying to conserve water, trying to do recycling. You know, when I was in Interior, we created the Water Smart program because through technology, changing out old turbines, putting in new turbines, doing a lot in terms of efficiency, how we measure how much, we can do a lot to save energy, to save water. And that's going to be true with data centers. They are here, they're going to stay. A1 is part of our future. So we have to figure out how we manage our limited supplies that still support these new technologies. You know, I've spent a lifetime, that's actually my expertise is in water law, and spent a lot of time working on these issues. It's really a question of how we manage our water supply for a lot of different uses without polluting it and making sure that it's accessible to everyone. You know, water, as we look at it in the West, you know, they say, I used to say this in a lot of my speeches, you know, water is a lifeblood, our lifeblood. Water is our lifeblood. People now say, well, you know, water really is the new liquid gold. You think about Dallas, you think about the Trinity River, you think about the Rio Grande, you think about the Colorado River. Look at how many demands are being placed on that very limited resource. Look at all the modeling that the Bureau of Reclamation and others have done on the decline in the water supply that we have in those major river systems. So we have a major challenge to make sure that as we use this limited water supply, declining water supply, that we're using it as efficiently and managing it as well as we can. And I know we can do it. We've done it in lots of places.
In fact, you started us on that path. And unfortunately, we're taking a few steps backward. But I don't want to pass up the opportunity because you are here and because of the role you most recently served. I want to talk now about the relationship between the United States and Mexico, and frankly, the rest of Latin America, but certainly with Mexico. If the United States is serious about reducing dependence on distant adversaries, on supply chain challenges, on integration across the border and in our economies, I think it's increasingly important that we recognize the critical part that Mexico has to play. We share a future, we share a border, we share a culture, we share a people. So my question is, what's a smarter way, a more connected way for us to work with our friends in the South and recognize the importance of the relationship?
So, Javier, if I were to summarize my own time in Mexico, it was not an easy time. There was the reality of Mexico, its politics.
Sí, esos mexicanos son muy problemáticos, los mexicanos.
Mira, pero hay muchos aquí que tienen un corazón muy positivo.
Eso.
Y en eso voy a hablar poquito en español, si me das el permiso aquí, con su permiso, como se dice, porque los mexicanos también tienen mucho respeto. And there is where I think we find the answer to where we have been, where we are, and where we have to go. We have to respect the relationship. You can't demonize the relationship. You can't call Mexicanos or Mexicans what they're being called now by people who occupy the White House. You have to say, we are one family. And let me just put it, you don't have to be about civil rights or anything like that. Just put it in stark economic and security terms. You talked about supply chains. I'm proud that we are part of the USMCA. That's a recognition that our supply chains are integrated. That's 500 million people on the North American continent. We, the United States and Mexico, became the #1 trading partner in the history of humanity when I was there. I'm proud of that because our supply chains are being integrated, whether it's on minerals, whether it's on energy, cars, in a lot of different ways. Tequila, beer, avocados. We're one family. And so my own view is we have to keep on that track. And at the end of the day, if you look at it from a global geopolitical national security basis, I, as a proud citizen of the United States, proud servant of this country in so many ways, we would rather have our neighbors, our friends along the 2,000-mile border being our partners than dealing with people across the ocean on the other side of the earth because of costs, because of national security. And so I would say there's no time in the history of the United States where we need more than ever this durable, lasting relationship founded on respect in the areas of a modern border that needs to be fixed because it's so broken, in security, where we need a national treaty organization between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. There's a lot of things that we have to do, but we're not going to get to that positive program, Javier, until we have the leadership that makes that fundamental recognition that the North American continent, the 500 million people that inhabit this North American continent are really one family. And we need to work towards that vision.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. But it begins as your mother and mine used to say, con respeto propio, ¿verdad? So now you've had a front row seat to, frankly, the most important bilateral relationships in the world. As a former ambassador, you know that it is our nation's largest, Mexico's our nation's largest trading partner. It's about $830 billion of bilateral trade every single year. And right here in the Lone Star State, Mexico is this state's top trading partner with about $130 billion of those dollars between Mexico and a willing buyer south of us. But for the business leaders in this room, how should we think about the U.S.-Mexico relationship, not just as a diplomatic issue, but as an economic, workforce, and an environmental partnership that, frankly, will benefit all of us? How do we change our thinking and even the way we address issues in a way that's more comprehensive and more forward-looking than the immediacy of the moment and, frankly, the politics of the moment, because that's not helping? What are your thoughts on that?
So first, I think nobody gets it better than the business community, because the business community invests on both sides of the border. You know, automobiles, you know, I went to the GM, Ford, Stellantis, Freightliner, you name them. Those cars are being manufactured in Mexico. They're the Silverados that we drive. You know, I was in Toluca at the Ford plant, and they asked me to go drive an all-electric car, the Mustang, the Mach 4. I think it goes 0 to 100 in like 3 seconds. Yeah. And it can go 300 miles. I did the same thing with GM and with others. So our supply chains are integrated, and the business community gets it. Because the business community, frankly, plans for a longer term. They can't plan for 4 years or 10 years or 20 years. If you're opening up a brewery or a tequila plant, whatever, you got to be planning for the longer term. So I think the business community sees it, and the business community has to stand up and be responsible for helping find solutions. I used to work a lot with John McCain, Ted Kennedy, George W. Bush, all friends of mine. And we're trying to fix the border. We're trying to fix immigration. Republicans, frankly, and there are some of you here in this audience, decided to kill our immigration reform bill because they wanted to take advantage of the political win that they would get. And they killed it, 2006, 2007. So I would say, and I would go, Tom Donahue, some of you remember him from the US Chamber of Commerce, I would say, Tom, why don't you help me and President Obama, John McCain, and others, and President Bush, get the business community to go out on immigration reform. It's an economic issue. It's a human rights issue in terms of the pain and suffering that we see with those who are on the migrant trail. But why don't you step up? The chamber didn't do it, frankly. And to their credit, they have now changed. So under the new leadership of the US Chamber of Commerce, they're in there. They want a modern border. They want immigration reform because of the labor aspects to it. So we've come a long ways. But now, in this 2026, Javier, it's time for the business community to step up because they have a longer-term vision than the political dynamics of this country, which only looks from one election to another. What's happening today? Everybody's looking to November 26. You know, it's what, 6 months out? You ask any business person here, are you planning 6 months out? You have to, because you have to mitigate your risk. But you're planning 5, 10. I'm an oil company, or I'm a renewable energy company. I have to be planning 10, 20 years out. And politics sometimes, to use a word I don't use often, trumps the reality of what the business community needs to do.
Good word. So certainly I think business, probably needs to step out from the ivory tower and get more engaged, roll our sleeves up and be part of the solution. Part of the relationship is really the collaboration that needs to exist between both our nations to secure the southern border. Now, how do we do this without undermining the very real, and you know I work on this every day, how do we secure that border without undermining the real workforce needs of very important cornerstone U.S. industries like agriculture, construction, hospitality, manufacturing, and even clean energy? You know better than most that this question has been the subject of much debate and much division of late. And that's been the case for years now, during Republican and Democratic administrations. So my question to you, in your view, what does a serious, balanced approach to securing the southern border look like for our country?
So it's a complicated question, but the answers are not that complicated because there are different components to it. Let me try to throw out a few of those, if I may, Javier. The first is we need to focus beyond the border to the southern part of Mexico. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec, 180 miles from the Pacific to the Atlantic, a place where there are poles of security, where Mexico really tried hard and is trying hard to develop a beltway of security and prosperity. So it's not just about the 2,000-mile border, it's in the south. It's about modernizing the border with Guatemala, which is now just a porous place, porous border for everything from human smuggling and traffickers to drugs that come from the south. So the solutions will start there. Coming to our border, 2,000 miles of border, we know what we need to do. We've done it in some places, a few places along the border. We need to modernize it, new technology, information sharing, joint patrols between the US and Mexico. Modernize it. If you look at it, it's a broken border. President Trump is absolutely right, okay? When he says the border's broken, absolutely. and the United States hasn't stepped up to fix it, nor has Mexico. I mean, it was one of the things that I tried very hard with Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I tried it with the White House and all the agencies here, is that we need to have joint planning and joint resourcing to create the most modern border in the world. It'll be good for families. It'll be good for all the human mobility that takes place across the border. It'd be good for all those tractor trailers that come from Mexico north, the tractor trailers that are going from the United States south. But it is hard to do. You know why it's hard to do? It's because the border is a result of a war. It's a result of the United States conquering Mexico. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, a border is created, okay? So nobody's gonna pay much attention to that border. And so the United States did its thing, Mexico did its thing. You have a president of Mexico here in the audience. I think if he would tell you honestly, he would say, the border is broken. There's a lot more that needs to happen. And the resources need to be there on the Mexican side. It needs to be a planning effort, it needs to be a resource effort, and it needs to be done jointly with the United States now. There's lots of debate here about the presidents of Mexico, what they've done and they haven't done. But we, on the United States side, have never done what we need to do to move expeditiously. I see my friends from Laredo who are here. 40% of all the commerce from Mexico to the United States flows through Laredo. It is a place where, frankly, there's no planning on both sides of the border to be effective and to move forward with the national security imperatives that are required to create a modern border. So I would say, your question is, how do we fix the border really, Javier? It's gonna take leadership from the White House, and I mean from the president. It's gonna take leadership from Mexico, and I mean from the president. We're lucky, I say this because I know her, with Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. She's been a leader that understands the importance of climate. She understands the importance of investment in infrastructure. So I hope there's an opportunity there. We don't know, we'll see with time. She's still relatively new. But we need to match that kind of willingness for the relationship. And part of our problem here is that right now the way that the United States is seeing the border, it's about we build a wall. We build a wall and we don't build the bridges.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an opportunity here, but it's gonna take some new leadership.
So an open and collaborative environment and mutual respect. You mentioned presidents, and my final question to you while we're at it, there's some members of the media here, there's some cameras rolling, and my final question to you is, if you had one thing to say to the President of the United States, I want you to look at the cameras, what would that one thing be that you would tell the President of the United States, sir?
So let me back up a little bit. So in 2004, I won an election for the United States Senate. Nobody thought I could win. People here in Dallas helped me. People in Houston, in San Antonio. I won against a guy that had a lot of money. I had no money. 7-month campaign, and we won. So I walk into the White House 7 days or so after the election, and there's 9 senators-elect to walk in with me, including the current majority leader, John Thune, including the former president of the United States, Barack Obama. So George W. Bush comes down at 7 a.m. in the morning, and he greets us. We go into a conference room right by the east room of the White House. And President Bush says, I won the election. I'm not gonna run for re-election ever again. And here on my right, Dick Cheney is never gonna run again. He's done running. And Karl Rove and Andy Card, other people in the room, they're not gonna run for any office. So he says, I want to do the most that I can do for the American people. Great. The Republicans, 7 senators elect were there, says, yes, President, we're behind you all the way. Remember, he won the election against John Kerry by a significant margin, including in my state. He won my state by as much. Bush won by 5. I won by 5 against my opponent. So my turn comes around, and he's very interested because here I am, the new guy from the West, wearing boots. He wants to know, what my recommendation is. So I said, we got to work on our economic security. We have to work on energy independence. But I said to him, Mr. President, you're from Texas. I'm glad we're here in Dallas, his home. So I said to him, here's your opportunity. For all our history, we have ignored our relationship with Mexico. Our foreign policy has been east-west, and we haven't focused on what we have to do in the Americas. I reminded him that JFK had started the Alliance for Progress. It was part of what I studied when I was in college in Costa Rica for 4 months. I said, what we need is a new Alliance for Progress with Mexico and the Americas. President Bush, by the way, on these issues was with us. He worked very hard directly with me on trying to get immigration reform and the border right. Okay, we lost. But I still remember his last call to me from Air Force One when we lost on the vote. He said, Senator, we lost, but we were on the right. We did the right thing. I said, Mr. President, we can't give up. We got to keep going. And so, back to your question, what would I tell the president? I would say we need a new relationship with Mexico. We need a new relationship with the Americas. We need to reorient our foreign policy. Yes, we can't forget the challenges and the conflicts and the instability in the Middle East and the competitiveness with China and the reality of Russia and where they are. Can't take our eye off that ball, but we can't put into essentially a second-class set of citizens of the world, Mexico and the Americas. We need to prioritize it. And my hope is that in 2026 and also in 2028, that the United States of America will wake up to that reality that what I call the borderlands are really the future of the United States of America. That's what I'm going to be working on. And I hope that we have a lot of people in this room that say that's where we have to go.
It's a great message right there. Before I forget, I want to share with the audience that the Secretary is putting out a book. It's called Borderlands. It's due to come out, I think, late in the summer. And I think my team will be handing out some of these placards, some of these cards for you to be able to pre-order the book. Now, I've had the privilege of reading a few of the excerpts, not the whole book. They only let me in on a couple things. But I was taken by the writing. And look, if you believe as I do that we are the caretakers of Mother Earth and that we have a responsibility and that long after we're gone, this earth will still be here. And the real question is, what are we doing to preserve it, to be good stewards? The book is a lot about that. It's about the relationships that we have to have with other nations and, frankly, our neighbors. It's what our parents taught us, to be good neighbors. And it's a firsthand account of an amazing American journey, the journey of this man. So I encourage you to please grab one of these and pre-order the book. And in conclusion, I want to just say a few things to close this out. Now, I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary. As we close out, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've heard. You were never about the cameras. You were never about the fighting and the division and the ugliness that we see in Washington today. You're part of a dying breed. Secretary Salazar's life and career have always illustrated something deeply American and deeply personal. Raised on a farm and a ranch in Colorado with roots that go back generations to the 1850s. And I think it's that kind of history that does something to a man. It grounds a man. It teaches him that land is not just property, it's an inheritance. It's a responsibility. That understanding, I think, has shaped everything that Ken Salazar and his public life have been about. It shaped the way he taught about conservation. It shaped the way He thought about the American West, about natural resources, about working people just like us, and the relationship between progress and preservation. Because to him, these were never abstract debates. They were not just talking points. They were real. They were and continue to be his life. And throughout his extraordinary career, Secretary Salazar has carried that responsibility with wisdom, seriousness, humility, and a grace. He has understood stewardship not simply as a political talking point, but as the preservation of American heritage, way above our politics. He has understood diplomacy not simply as negotiation, but as the patient, respectful, and necessary work to build trust. He has understood public service not as a performance, but as a duty. And at a time when so much of our public life feels divided and performative and short-sighted and ugly, his example that our best future will be built on cooperation, on stewardship, on mutual respect, and a willingness to think beyond the politics of the moment. That matters now more than ever. He has helped this country think bigger, longer term, and more seriously about what we owe one another. But always quietly, always with dignity and elegance, not playing for the camera, not being disrespectful. And most importantly, he has done all of this without ever losing sight of the human side of leadership. And throughout his career, he has illustrated that meaningful public service centered around a very simple idea, that the work is not about you. It's about the people who will live with your decisions. It's about children, yet unborn, who will inherit your choices. Ken Salazar and his service are rooted in conviction, in humility, in a deep respect for the people and places that make this country what it is. He has served our nation all the way from Mount Denali in Alaska to the Padre Island National Seashore at the Gulf of Mexico, right here in Texas, and all points in between. Think about it. His duty encompassed 500 million acres of land, 35,000 miles of shoreline, and over 100 national monuments. His work has left a lasting mark on our nation and on generations of leaders who will follow. That's why before we leave here today, I want to recognize Secretary Salazar with the highest honor that the USHBC bestows upon the best of our nation's leaders. I want to present him with the American Icon Award. This award honors individuals whose leadership, service, and vision have left a lasting mark on our country and helped shape a stronger and shared future. It recognizes leaders whose legacy rises above any single title or any moment, and instead reflects on a lifetime of impact. This honor is reserved for those who embody the highest ideals of public life. In my public life of 22 years, I've only handed it out twice before. Once to John McCain and once to John Lewis. And those two were 14 years ago. This honor is reserved for those who embody the highest ideals of public life: integrity, wisdom, stewardship, courage, and a deep commitment to the American promise. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service. Thank you for your legacy. And thank you for the example that you continue to leave behind. If you would please join me at the podium, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and help me present the American Icon Award to the one and only Secretary Ken Salazar. Let's get a photo. Get up here, Pete.
Let me get my. ¿Qué dice?
Here you go, sir. Congratulations, sir.
Can I have a minute?
God bless you. Yes, sir.
Peter. So, awards are wonderful to receive. This is a very special one because it comes from Javier and the U.S. Hispanic Business Council. And I see the power in this room, which is just so incredible and so inspiring. So I want to say an American icon is Javier, the U.S. Hispanic Business Council, and all of you. So let's give them and Trammell Crow a round of applause for this convening. Yeah, we all ask ourselves this question. Everybody does. Yeah. Who are we? What are we doing? What's our purpose in life? We keep going. You see President Calderon, who's been patiently hearing some of our comments here. There's a purpose there. I see President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, supposedly in Tabasco. There's a purpose there. I see each and every one of you. Some of you I worked with a lot when I was in Mexico, and some of you I worked in Washington, D.C. So what's our purpose? So for me, at least, my purpose today is about the borderlands. It is a personal memoir, but it's much more than that. It is, yes, about my upbringing. It is, and the Mexican audience probably is going to be very interested in what I have to say about Mexican politics and the parties and its history and its future. But it's much more than that. It's a calling for a movement about what we have to do in these times. It's about this conversation that we were just having. It's about EarthX. How do we use our resources, no matter who we are, to find the purpose that will change our world for the better? We've come too far. We've come too far. Through voting rights and struggles, the Civil Rights War, the Civil Rights Movement. We can't allow a project of erasure that we see to basically take our country in the wrong direction. We can build on what we have done. And that's what this book is all about. It's how do we create a new North American alliance? How do we create a durable North American security organization bound by treaties as opposed to work through suspicion and thinking about old stories that have happened between the United States and Mexico? How do we deal with the violence and the cartels that plague Mexico to the point where you have 6 countries where people cannot travel if they work for the U.S. Embassy? How do we deal with fentanyl and the reality of the rivers of guns that flow from the United States to Mexico? How do we modernize this border? How do we create a family in North America? So what I ask you to do, each and every one of you, I'll be traveling around the country. Don Salazar and Javier have already promised that we can do something in Salt Lake City. We're going to do something in Miami. We're going to do in New York, San Francisco, LA. I'll just give you a sense of my tour of Borderlands. We'll be in Texas, coming along the border, El Paso, McAllen, Brownsville, up to San Antonio and Austin, over to Houston, up to Dallas. And then we'll come back again, and we'll do the Camino Real, El Paso, up to Albuquerque, Santa Fe, to my native San Luis Valley, to the place of the Sangre de Cristos and the San Juans and the birthplace of the Rio Grande. I want you to join me in this journey. So it's not about a book. It's really not about book sales, because I really don't care about that. It's really about the message that we can do better. So come join me. Come see the world that I believe in. Come see this planet, that little marble that we have to protect. Come see the suffering of the migrants that I've seen, so many people who have died in camps and huge, almost massacres that I've seen in places like Tuxtla Gutiérrez. Come see that world. Come see it with me. If you do, I promise you that we can change the world. But it's going to take all of us doing what we can. Thank you so much, Javier. I appreciate it.